for working with beginning farmers and ranchers. In this session, we're going to talk about supporting generational transfers. If you look at your screen below the video is a tab that you can see. It says Q&A and polls. There's a poll that just popped up, at least on my screen. And the question that we'd like to ask you in this poll is, how do you imagine, so how do you think beginning farmers think about farm succession planning? You've got a bunch of choices there. Pick one of those choices and we'll let you know how that goes. Let me see, I know which one I'm going to choose. I'll start this off there. I've got to participate in this poll so that I can see the results. So, purpose of this panel is to provide really a good conversation about farm succession planning, the implementation process, its effect on the family and farm businesses, and the success rate, if we can define what success really is for farm succession planning. Our goal is to give you really some very different perspectives on this from our panelists. We're still trying to get our moderator, Jesika Harper from Northwest Farm Credit, on the phone. She is the Vice President for the Ag Vision Program in Spokane. Oh, and all right, let me back up a sec. I've got some important notes I should, for those of you who are just joining us now, on your SWUGO screen, on the screen that you use to join this conference, there is a tab that says Event Hub, and that's what you have to click on to find anything. That will give you the access to the agenda, and then you click on the agenda to join this meeting, which if you're listening to me now, you've already done. Below the video of the Zoom meeting that you're seeing is a Q&A tab. Please ask questions. The poll is up right now, so you can participate in the poll. And after we finish this session, right at the very bottom, if you scroll even below the poll or the Q&A area, there's a blue button that says Networking Lounge. And you can join us in the Networking Lounge. There's a little bit of a password and login sort of protection there, but please figure that out and join us. If you are posting on social media, use hashtag BFR1220. Our moderator, as I said, is hopefully going to be Jesika Harper of Northwest Farm Credit. She's the Vice President of the Ag Vision Program, located in, she is located in Spokane. Actually, she's at her home in northern Idaho, which is probably the connection problem that we're experiencing, why she's not with us now. We also have with us Ryan Patton from Nationwide Insurance. He's a consultant at the Advanced Consulting Group in the Nationwide Retirement Institute in Columbus, Ohio. And John Baker is an attorney at law. He is part of the Iowa Concern Hotline, and his interaction with the Beginning Farmer Program at Iowa State is legendary, and we'll be hearing from him also. And if we have Jesika, jump right in now if you're available. And if not, I will do a little bit of introduction here on behalf of Jesika, and then we'll skip down in the slides to Ryan. Okay, so I tell you that I'm Jesika Harper, but I'm not. But she is the Vice President of Ag Vision, the Young Beginning Small Farmer Program at Northwest Farm Credit Services in Spokane, Washington. And the purpose of this panel on generational transfers is to provide different perspectives on farm succession planning, the implementation process, the family and farm business impact, and the success rate. During the course of this panel, we're going to talk about how to get beginning farmers and their families interested in the process, and keep them committed to carrying it out and ultimately to be effective in their succession plan implementation. That is a very ambitious goal, so I'm glad to have the support of two experts in the field, Ryan Patton of Nationwide Insurance, an attorney and consultant in the Advanced Consulting Group at Nationwide Retirement Institute, and John Baker, an attorney at the Beginning Farmer Center at Iowa State University Extension, and founder and chair of the International Farm Transition Network. I'll take since Jessica's slide are up, I'll make believe I'm Jessica. How's that? And introduce myself and my organization's perspective on farm planning and succession. Northwest Farm Credit, as far as its customers, as a farm credit association, can only lend to people in agriculture pretty much. They have a lot of commodities. You can see wheat. Actually, that's a friend of mine there, pictured Ryan Lankford in Washington State. I'm glad to see Ryan here, at least in his photo. And because there's so many commodities in the Northwest, particularly wheat and legumes, Northwest Farm Credit understands the cyclical nature of those businesses and the need to have ongoing long-term relationships to be able to get through those rough times. Northwest Farm Credit is organized, as are all farm credit associations, as a cooperative. It's owned by its members, so it's kind of like a credit union for farmers, if you will, and is part of the nationwide farm credit system. Let's go to the next slide. The Ag Vision program that Jessica heads up is the branded program that Northwest Farm Credit has for their Young Beginning Small Farmer program. Each of the 68 farm credit associations around the country has their own program. Northwest Farm Credits is very unique. Part of the similar things that they have, similar to other farm credits, is that they waive fees. They provide reduced interest rates for beginning farmers. They engage in programs where they are providing financial mentors, not mentors on how to run the farm business per se, but to be able to help the beginning farmers as they start up their accounting systems, as they engage in the task of learning how to do the accounting for their business as well as to manage their business. They gather some of those beginning farmers together in each of the 4 states in which Northwest Farm Credit does business so that they can do networking. Of course, that's all virtual now, so that's not happening. Also, Northwest Farm Credit provides cash vouchers for beginning farmers who spend money on training for themselves in financial skills or for the actual product of buying some software. Next slide, please. One of the things that's different about Northwest Farm Credit is that they are so focused on education. Their sessions that they have for farmers, a conference every year in each of their states, and now they're doing it at an even smaller regional level, involves bringing in some high-powered speakers and exposing the beginning farmers to different concepts, elevated expectations, if you will, for their farm businesses and their record-keeping systems. One of the things that as an educational program that the Ag Vision program has is a generational transfer element to that program, which a beginning farmer can sign up for that. They're able to come back, the beginning farmer is able to participate. A little bit. We'll get her. I know we'll get her. The beginning farmer program that Northwest Farm Credit has allows the beginning farmers to participate for 4 years. And then in the second year, they are encouraged to bring in, if they have an older generation on the farm, bring in their parents or grandparents to participate in the farm business planning education process. And that's where they really start to involve those beginning farmers in thinking about farm business succession planning and involving parents at the same time. So it's a very, very high-touch, high-involvement program. Next slide, please. So one of the things that is probably different than what you would think of for an agricultural lender like Northwest Farm Credit to offer is education. But it really is a core piece of Northwest Farm Credit's offering to beginning farmers. I encourage you to visit their website. If you're a person who trains beginning farmers, they have a huge amount of resources that are really ready to put in the hands of the beginning farmer, and are even better, of course, if they have a guide, the beginning farmer trainer that can help them through that. Next slide, please.
Gary, I'm finally on here.
All right, Jessica, thank you. Take it away.
Goodness. Well, first off, I just want to apologize. I've not ever had internet issues quite like that before. And so it just figures that it was on a very important day like today. I don't know what that's about, but regardless, thank you. So as Gary has so eloquently talked about Northwest Farm Credit, and I'm grateful for that, he led us to the right spot here on family business resources. So on our website, we have a lot of different things that anyone can access to really start with the basics, which is where we want everyone to begin, with videos and webinars. There's lots of courses for an hour or less that you can log into to really get a good foundation of how do I as an individual prepare myself before I start asking anything of others. And then from there, we encourage our young and beginning producers to attend succession workshops, either with their family members or even just to take one of these classes by themselves. We've actually got some starting in January and February on our website that anybody here that's interested can log in and learn more. Then lastly, once those things have been done, we want to see more of a formal plan start to develop, which Ryan and John are going to help go into further today. But we have a 3-day retreat that we offer that families go to together with our customers. You know, those are things that we pay for them to come to Spokane when we can, obviously in normal periods of time. We have speakers come in that are professionals, you know, attorneys and accountants, to talk about how to start building these more formally. Next slide, please. So we know that this is an important area of focus for our customers. In 2020, data from recent virtual conferences that we hosted in our territory indicated that 60% of our customers plan to transition ownership and management to the next generation within the next 10 years. And of that number, 65% are going to transition to a family member, but 26% don't know who that is or what that will look like. So with that in mind, you know, what we look at is approaching succession planning from a business and family foundations first approach. So we start with effective communication and understanding of each other's perspectives before beginning to plan for that transition. That process includes these 3 distinct areas of focus. So first through the business with a business plan, then discussing the people through the succession plan, and then third, the assets, which is through a estate plan philosophy. Our practice isn't focused on estate planning, you know, the legal and accounting aspects of asset transition, but the last stage of the planning process includes the development of an estate plan philosophy to ensure alignment and provide more clear direction for the family's legal and accounting professionals. So now we want to hear from Ryan. Ryan, please continue with your slides.
All right, thank you, Jessica. I'm glad you're on. So we can go ahead to the next slide here. So a little bit about Nationwide. Nationwide has a program out there. It's called Land is Your Legacy, and it's a transition planning program for farmers and ranchers. And essentially everything that Jessica hit on there, as far as, you know, how do we get one farm successfully down to the next generation, is really what our focus is. And we'll dive into that here in a few other slides here. We can go to the next one. Just from a compliance perspective, at Nationwide, we don't give any specific legal or tax advice. What we do is empower you to have those conversations and discussions with your local attorney and CPA. We'll point out all those nuancy things that you should be aware of, and then let those local folks really take you to the finish line. So little compliance slide for you just off the get-go here. Next slide, please. So a good secret about Nationwide is we were actually founded by farmers. So back in 1926, the Ohio Farm Bureau actually founded Farm Bureau Mutual. As the years kind of progressed on, in 1955, we adopted our formal name. So we've been known as Nationwide since then. Big turning point for us was the acquisition of farmland insurance as part of the Nationwide family. That really positioned us well to be the #1 farm insurer in the nation. So we've got a lot of skin in the game, and that's why in 2011, our board came to my leader, Gail Chrisley, and said, "Hey, we've got so many farm folks. What are we doing to help them prepare for this challenging discussion?" And that's where the program kicked off. So today, that's where we spend a lot of our time, and we can actually go to the next slide with a few other details here too. So just so you're aware, and this goes back to the roots as well, today we're still that #1 farm insurer across the country, and pretty unique for a Fortune 100 company. We actually have always had a chairman of our board as an active farmer, and our board is actually comprised of more than a majority of farmers. So pretty unique. We also sponsor a laundry list of farm bureaus out there. So we're well ingrained in supporting of just agriculture. So we're not just Dale Earnhardt and Peyton Manning. We've got a lot more to us. And as we said, that program that we have, Land is Your Legacy, that's actually helped out over 1,000 members now. So I came to Nationwide back in early 2013, and I've been lucky to be a part of most of those transition discussions. So I've seen everything from a couple acres all the way up to well over 100,000 acre farm. So you get a little bit of everything. No shoe fits everything. So no one size fits all. So we can go to the next slide here. So what's kind of the market? What's really driving our discussions as well? There's roughly 2 million farmers out there. That number keeps going down, as you can imagine. A big chunk of that is just the age of the average farmer. That continues to actually rise. And as part of that, and Jesika said this really well, those folks that don't have a transition plan, more times than not, we see that farm getting split up or fractionalized. So those individuals, our main mission is really to keep the farm as the family farm to the best degree that we can, if that's what the client intends. So if that's what the farmer or rancher wants, we want to help provide that assistance for them. And as you can see there, only about 29% have an actual transition plan. And I would say that is loose. A transition plan probably means they have a will in place, but not really a full transition plan. So we can go to the next slide. So from our perspective, what is a transition plan? It really includes these 5 key areas, and we've ranked them in this order. And just to Jessica's point, we feel that this is the most appropriate way to deal with this topic. So succession planning is first. That's people planning. Who should be at the table? Who should be active on the farm? Who maybe is better at the book side as opposed to the management side? All those discussions around people planning, that's where you have to start. Business planning comes second. So are we doing the right things? Are we, to Jessica's point as well, do we have the right farm management from a book perspective in place to really provide for those folks we want to have on the farm? Risk management is key. We want to protect the things that we have from those risks that are known and potentially unknown as well. Financial independence is another big one for us. We want to see that generation that's the current owner have the funds necessary to step back and allow that next generation to really step forward and take that more mentorship capacity, be a mentor to that next generation and not have as much skin in the game. Let them make those decisions. And then lastly, after all of those items have been addressed, that's when you memorialize everything. That's when you go to the attorney and say, here's exactly what I need to do because I've had those discussions with who should be at the table. So those are our 5 key areas, and it sounds a lot like what Jesika said, and I'm sure John probably has something very, very similar. to this as well. One of the other things that we do just real quickly is it's challenging to get all of those things put together. So at our program here with Land Your Legacy, we create a package for the farmer and rancher that goes over all of those items. So we've got it all somewhat on this front page here of our booklet that we'll give out to those farmers and ranchers. And this is a great way to depict that whole story. So if we have Dave that has 3 children and say 2 are active and 1 is inactive, how do we plan for that? Should everybody be seen as equal? And how do we deal with that Thanksgiving table tension potentially if, say in our example here, if Dee Dee didn't get as much as Steve and Tim? So all of those items we want to address and have it easily digestible for folks too. So we can go to the next slide there. And just to be quick, I wanted to wrap up with a few things. If you're interested in learning some more, there's a good link for you there, nationwide/yourland. That's got a lot of educational videos, and some of our folks that have actually gone through the program share their testimonials too. So I'd encourage you to check those out, and I'm looking forward to being here.
Excellent. Ryan, thanks for that description of Nationwide's Land as Your Legacy program. I look forward to having more questions about, or more answers about that. John, could you please tell us about your approach to farm succession planning?
Okay, well, just by a little bit of background, I got involved in this after I was hired by the university in the mid-1980s. Many of you will recall that period of time, probably not fondly. And that was the farm debt crisis. And there was a whole generation of young farmers who either potential young farmers who didn't come back, or got wiped out financially. And that caused me to begin thinking about it more from a business point of view than a legal point of view. In addition to the law degree, I have a couple of business degrees. Next slide, please. I like this quote because I think it conveys really what the issue is, and that the art of shipbuilding is not in the wood. If it were, we would have ships by nature. Aristotle said that over 2,000 years ago, simply meaning that when an oak tree fell down in Greece, it didn't turn into a Greek trireme with sails and oars and that. It took human intervention. So likewise, just owning farmland doesn't create a farmer. It doesn't, and moving farmland to another generation doesn't create a farm business. Next slide, please. Well, why don't people plan? Well, they think it's too complicated, and it is complex. You have to deal with management, you have to deal with assets, transfers, many other things like that. And it is similar to working on your car's engine while it's still running. You have to really work on these things all at one time. Most people don't necessarily like to plan. They like to do what it is that they got in business to do, but they don't like to spend time in planning. Another thing is you have to face your own mortality, and who wants to sit around for a long time talking about the dying, but that's one of the issues that happens. Oftentimes people know that there's going to be family conflict, and so they'll avoid it. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard from people to say, well, the kids can fight it out after we're gone, to which I always make the comment, well, that's a unique parenting plan, and is that what you want your kids to do after you died, is to hate each other? The other thing is people believe that they've got plenty of time. Well, we've got time to do this. Next slide, please. February 25th, 2017. Probably doesn't mean anything to anybody, but it means a lot to me. That was a Saturday, and I had met with a young fellow and his wife who were involved in a farm operation in South Dakota. His father was alive, his brother was on the farm, there were a couple of sisters, And they asked if I would be willing to travel up to eastern South Dakota and try to help them figure out what to do in a way much like Ryan described, and not doing the work for them, but preparing them to have the local folks do it. I got home that afternoon and my wife said, I stumbled and ran into the door jamb, and now I can't move my right leg. And I thought that perhaps she had damaged a nerve or that. So it got progressively worse. I went up to the hospital, they sent us back home, went up to, and it turned out it was the first of the 4 strokes that my wife had that year, and a knee and replacement that became infected. And she spent 8 months in the hospital or in a care facility. She's back home now. She has weakness on her left side, but she cognitively is fine. And that changed our lives and our plans immediately. And so you have to realize that your time isn't contingent upon your plan. Your plan's contingent upon time. And so you don't know how much time you've got. Next slide, please. Well, a long time ago, I figured out that nobody ever does anything they don't really want to do. We all do things we don't like to do, but we don't truly want to do something, we just won't. And so that got me thinking about, when I sit with a family, where should I start talking to them? And to me, it was obvious that what is it they want to do? What's important to them? Do they want to pass the farm on or to the next generation? And what's important to them creates that vision or that idea of this is what I intend for my future. This is what I see for my future. That once you have that, then your mission is to, how do I create that future? And you would set goals and have objective measures to measure progress to those goals, have strategies to carry out and accomplish those goals. And tactics are those daily things that you do to make sure you're carrying out the strategies to reach the goals that create the future you want based on what's important to you. Next slide, please. Perspective. I like this quote. I'm not going to try and pronounce the rabbi's name, but it is on perspective, and we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. We all bring biases and different views, points of view, and perspective on things. And part of when we sit down with a farm family, we have to get them not necessarily to agree to everybody's perspective, but to at least understand it and realize that that is their perspective. Next slide, please. So looking at this, we look at it as kind of where are we now? How are we going to get there? And where do we want to be? And so there's kind of this preparation and testing. Is the successor prepared with the requisite skills and time and motivation to come back and take over the farm business? Is the farm business operator owner, are they ready to begin this process? And then the testing phase in business, you would call that where you're being hired, and they're going to wait about 6 months because you're going to be a probationary employee, and if you do well, then they may offer you the good job. How are we going to get there? After you've done that preparation and testing, and the successor and the established owner have worked together, you see that kind of commitment that's there, and so you can then move to a more established phase where you might begin sharing ownership of assets, operating agreements, establishing a business entity. And finally, the last stage is there has to be a withdrawal of managerial control by the older generation, transferring that managerial control to the next, in the younger generation. And eventually there's a retirement. You either plan for it or it happens to you, or you have some unexpected events such as happened in our lives that causes one to change their plans. So there are things that happen that can be worse than dying, and I think we could all think of some people who've had strokes or dementia or that kind of thing. So next slide, please. Let's just kind of breeze through these next few slides, if you would. The next slide. There is a Latin phrase that I learned a long time ago, festina lente, means make haste slowly, and that may not sound like it makes any sense, but we have a similar expression that sometimes to speed up, you need to slow down. So, you know, saying to that successor, someday this will all be yours, is not planning. It's not even a vision. It's just a statement. So we don't need this idea. We don't need to start planning. We've got plenty of time. Well, families need to start now. They need to make haste, but they need to be thoughtful and deliberate and be methodical. In other words, they need to make haste slowly and move through this process. They're not going to get this done in a day. They're not going to get it done in a week, a month, or a year. It's going to be a continuing process because there's a continuing relationship between the owner and the successor and all of the people and principals involved. So it's an ongoing process for the life of the business. Next slide, please. And that's my contact information. And if anyone has any questions after this presentation or would like to contact me, I'd be happy to visit with them. I've been doing this work for about 40 years now. And I have lots of material that I've developed over the years and be willing to share, spreadsheets, various different things. So if you feel the need to contact me, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You've probably noticed that while the three of us come at the subject of farm succession planning from different viewpoints, we in our organizations donate or devote a lot of time and effort to this topic. One aspect of Northwest Farm Credit's reason to establish training around farm succession planning is that we serve many customers who have substantial farm businesses. These customers have told us that they would benefit from help in this area. And as a lender, we recognize the risk to sustainability of their farm businesses surrounding the asset management transition that's inevitable on each farm. So in a nutshell, we're trying to reduce the risks for farm families involved in the transfer of their enterprises. Ryan, how would you describe the essence of Nationwide's perspective on farm transition planning as an insurance company?
Yeah, I would say very similar. You know, we have so many farm and ranch members as part of Nationwide that it would just be a disservice if we have the skill set to really help these folks. And some of this can be very nasty. I believe one of the comments in there already was about what do you do with multiple entities and how do you get things around? And there's just so much complexity. So we've got the resources there to really help with those questions. And from Nationwide's perspective, we want to offer those out. And that's why we do it from a free perspective as well. So I don't know if that really answers that for you, but we just have so much passion around who founded Nationwide that we want to give back to this community because they're the ones that built us and we want to support that. John, you probably have some similar comments around that as well.
Yes, you know, Iowa State University Cooperative Extension Service is a public university. It's funded by federal funds, state funds, local funds. And so we help anyone. It is to extend the knowledge of the university out to the public, and that's what we have tried to do. So we have a program that deals with linking up a beginning farmer with a farmer that doesn't have heirs or doesn't have any heirs that want to take over the farm business. And we strongly believe that to be successful at any endeavor, there has to be education and planning. So we focus on the education and planning.
Thank you. John, in your introductory slides, you talked about why people don't plan, and then a personal example of the mindset that we all have plenty of time to develop a plan. Thinking about those in the audience who train beginning farmers, what do you suggest that they say that's going to motivate them to start succession planning, and when should that encouragement start?
Well, the sooner that you start planning, the more options that are available to you to select, add an enterprise or that. The hardest ones that I have ever dealt with, and Ryan, I'm sure you probably could echo this, and that is when you meet with a family and they're all there at the table and someone announces that, the principal operator, Dad, was at the doctor's the other day and we found out that it's inoperable and it's terminal and it looks like about 6 months. And so there's been no transition plan put in place. It's a sole proprietorship. Everything's run out of one checkbook. The son or daughter may have been involved in the business for many years, does a lot of the labor, but was never shared with any of the management decision-making or information about the management and that. And trying to put that all together at a time like that is just, it can be done, but it's very difficult to do. And you're very limited, as that window of opportunity begins to descend. It descends can be fairly quickly. One of the best ones I ever saw was a fellow who's bringing his son into the business. And I asked him, when did you start planning this? And he said, the day he was born, because I knew if he didn't come back, I would still have a better operation because I would have managed it better. So I think that's the key. The people have to realize that time isn't going to stand still for them. And when they do it, just as when we do our 4-day seminar with families to bring them back on the farm, and I do the introduction and I talk about this whole issue of time and that, I found a bunch of little wooden discs. They have TUIT written on it, T-U-I-T. And so I put those in an envelope, and that last slide about Festina Lente, there's some additional I use there, and I tell them, okay, open up your envelope and dump that out. And I tell them, okay, you said you're going to do planning when you got around to it. Well, you have around to it now. Start planning. And it's just a way of, it's humorous, but there's an old Yiddish proverb that a lesson taught with humor is a lesson learned, and I believe that.
That's great. Ryan, a significant feature of Nationwide's process is documenting the process along the way. Is that an intentional aspect of your program's design?
Absolutely. I would say the biggest issue that we generally face is we'll get folks that'll come in and say, hey, I've already done a transition plan. This is more of a double check for me. And what they've told us essentially is, I've gone to the attorney, spent some good money, but I didn't go through the process, kind of like what John was saying. I never went through the process of really addressing who needs to be in what role, to what capacity. Are there still those old issues of, well, he got grandpa's gun and, I'm going to hold that against him, even though I was 10, I'm holding that against him at 45 or 50. So all of those items really need to be addressed. And that's why we have those rankings. So estate planning is always the last thing. And we really push that for folks. We want them to be fully aware of any of the costs that they're going to be facing for transition planning, rather than trying to go back and make adjustments. So absolutely. Yep, it's a big one for us.
That makes sense. So you talked about farm business planning as one step in your process. Who do you call in to help with that? And what are some of the problems that might surface when there's a close examination of the farm business itself?
Yeah. So I think a real great partner in this would be the Farm Credit Group, just generally speaking. For example, in Ohio, where I'm out of, we have a close relationship with Farm Credit Mid-America. And one of the programs that they offer for this young and beginning group is a Know to Grow program. And they focus almost exclusively on just those financial wellness and financial abilities from the farm's perspective. And that really helps drive a better interest rate from the group, but it also drives just understanding how to manage the good and the bad. What should I be doing to set aside funds? There's other groups like that that we partner with throughout the U.S. That's just one example of many that are really, really strong on that side, and why we partner with folks like that to make sure that individuals have that well-rounded transition.
Thank you. And Northwest Farm Credit is a lender, and knowing farm business performance is an essential part of extending credit in transitions like this to the next generation. We see the need for attaining a certain level of financial skill as part of that process. Our loan officers learn the roles and responsibilities of those involved on the operation, and then have a conversation about the needs of the business and who's responsible for each of those areas. We always strongly encourage the owners, general managers, those running the office to participate in financial educational courses to build their skills in these areas. When we're on the farm, we encourage everyone, though, to have a solid baseline of basic financial management, and also understand that frequently we get those family members that are primarily responsible and interested in the production aspects of the farm, and a lot of times they just want to spend more of their time educating themselves in those areas, but we do try to incentivize everyone getting a solid baseline. John, the planning process that you described started with values and what's important, and ended with tactics. How do I carry out the strategies to accomplish the goals? Where does an assessment of performance and sustainability of the existing farm business fit into your process?
Well, it's throughout the whole process. After confirming that what the people, the principals really want to do is to have a succession plan. And you have to investigate that. And it's not just when they say they want to have a succession plan. Are they actually doing the things to show that that's there? Are they sharing the information and transferring some of that management? And so, it's not uncommon. We all often say we want to do something that we don't really want to do. I laughingly say that 50 years ago, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I weighed 175 pounds, and then I got fat. And I've been fat for over 50 years. And I've tried everything but exercise and diet, and I can't seem to lose a pound. And so, after that, there is this genuine commitment to putting this plan together. Then to create a vision, you have to have an assessment of, the resource inventory, the management inventory, financial inventory, and analysis of these things. What are the assets? What can we do with them? And all that's going to change as you move through this planning process, because when you decide that you're going to create this kind of a future, this is that future for this business, adding enterprise, adding assets. How are you going to do that? Are you managing efficiently and effectively now? If you're losing money now and you can get to double your size, you could probably be broke in half the time. So we need to continually monitor this process as we go through, and recognize that it is a risk management strategy, because the rain doesn't always rain when it should, and the markets don't always give you the return that they should. So how are you going to deal with those as you go through? So that analysis goes on considerably throughout the whole process. There's, I have several other slides that expand that more, but that's a 4-day seminar.
Sure. Well, let's shift our sights towards getting things started with our producers. So we want to talk about, who needs to be motivated to carry out farm succession and how to encourage them. There are a few elements of Northwest Farm Succession program design that we think heavily influence building the commitment to undertake and complete a farm succession plan. The incoming or junior generation needs clarity for the future, understandably. And frequently the parents or senior generation just doesn't want to talk about it, as we mentioned earlier. We frequently begin by encouraging the younger generation, just talking to them without mom and dad around, to explore how these conversations might look during our annual Young and Beginning Producer Conference and other similar offerings that are just targeted towards that customer base. We share with them examples of how to obtain buy-in, and our consultants counsel younger producers and encourage ways to start the conversation that build trust and validate legacy. And I think in the beginning, they might think that's kind of the touchy-feely stuff, but we've found that if we ask them to take a really good look at the history of the business and then ask the senior generation exactly what they want their legacy to be, it will allow the senior generation to hear a sincere interest in the past and then give them an opportunity to outline what their legacy is. One of the roles of the junior generation is to carry on that legacy in the future. We offer tools like there's a DISC behavioral assessment that we use to help them build their communication skills and find out what their style is. And then also we'll give that to the parents, and so they can start to see similarities and differences and then understand how to speak in ways so that people can hear it. And then offer talking points in legacy conversations to try to help open minds and reduce some of the emotional elements of conversations like this. We tell the younger generation not to come in loaded, come in ready to listen. That creates a foundation that helps with more constructive conversations in the future. John, in your introductory slides, you talked about conversation confusion that revolves around timing, location, vocabulary, roles, etc. Can you explain these barriers and how to get past them?
Yeah, and I developed this slide and this thought process after a lot of different years of working with farm families. And timing, it's, families are scattered now. You may have some children on one coast, you may have one on the farm, you may have some locally. You may be an active farmer, but your parents are still alive and own the land, and you've got a son or daughter. So when are we going to have these conversations? And I often hear, well, the kids are all going to be back for Thanksgiving, so we'll talk about it then. So, everybody's always stressed out at the holidays anyhow. And so you're going to sit down at the Thanksgiving table, and is it going to be Dad, pass the turkey when you die, what's in your will? This is a business meeting, and business meetings are held at different, at specific times. And location, where does it take place? Well, you're in mom and dad's home, and dad's going to be sitting at the dinner table where he always sat, and you're going to sit where you always sat when you were a kid. And mom's going to be in the kitchen doing what moms do, which is getting the coffee and the cookies and all these different kinds of things. So all this family dynamic overlays what's supposed to be a business meeting. And when you were a kid sitting at the table, did you argue with your father? It's not the right relationship. So I encourage people to, go to their local extension office, or go to the, does their place of worship have a meeting room that they could use? Does the bank, a restaurant, someplace like that? Then what's the role that's there? And what is their role in the business? Are they the chief executive officer? Are they the chief financial officer? Are they a production manager? Are they an enterprise manager? And we already know the family roles. I mean, who your brothers and sisters and mom and dad and nieces and nephews and everybody else are, but we need to talk about these and identify what role we're at the meeting. Then there's the vocabulary. What are we using the vocabulary of business, or are we using the vocabulary of family? we need to use the vocabulary of business. There was a Austrian philosopher at the early part of the 20th century. His name was Ludwig Wittgenstein, and he said the limits of my language are the limits of my mind. All I know is what I have words for. Well, if you can't describe the business in business terms, how are you going to pass that on to someone else? So use that vocabulary of business. And then lastly, what happens if you have a big conflict in the family? Usually what happens, kind of that when your back's against the wall, what's your default position? Where you were most comfortable. Where were you most comfortable? As a parent or as a child, right? And so that's kind of the fallback, but those conflicts don't go away, and those conflicts can be the source of the next conflict because they didn't get resolved. So if there is a conflict, maybe it's time to bring in that facilitator or that mediator. One of the things we've done through the International Farm Transition Network is trained farm business consultants and to go in and help families do this kind of planning, to facilitate it in their core, and we call them coordinators, because they're not just a mediator that comes in once, but they follow up on these things. They don't provide them with any services other than that, or any products other than that. And you know, if it's time to get the lender in there, let's bring the lender in at the proper time, and let's clarify what the role is that other people need and what they need to do.
Thanks, John. You have so many great experiences and stories to share. Ryan, John's last point was about conflict in the process. How does conflict arise in the Land is Your Legacy process, and who's responsible for mediating potential conflicts among the many people that are likely to be involved?
Yeah, I think John hit that pretty well. Conflicts are challenging, especially in this space. It's not just a business, like John said, it's a family business. So all of those family issues, the tensions and everything like that have come up, probably could come up again. So two of the things that we do that we feel help to mitigate some of that is we partner with financial professionals all across the country that really serve as that role, almost like a quarterback. So they're going to be there helping facilitate, just to John's point, bringing in that lender when they need to be brought in, bringing in the attorney, the CPA, all of those professionals. When they need brought in, you really need somebody there to make you feel like you're that top level executive, to have all those folks sitting in the room with you, hearing your voice, making sure that one decision by one person, say a lender or say an attorney, is in alignment with everything else that you're doing. So I would say the quarterback approach with our financial professionals is key. And the reason why I would say them is the way they approach it is they have this mentality of them being the farm's voice. So one of the things one of my coworkers said before he retired was, you need to let the farm speak and let the farm speak loudest. So they're going to be that voice of the farm sitting at the dinner table. They'll say, from the farm's perspective, who is it telling the farm needs to run the operations? Who is the farm saying needs to manage the books? So don't take any of the family issues into aspect there. It's really just the farm's voice and letting that voice be heard. So those I think are the two loudest ones that we do and focus on at Nationwide here.
That's a great framework. So there's a philosophical question that we find we have to address in our program, and that's the distinction between coming up with a plan that is equitable as opposed to equal in its distribution of assets and responsibilities. Dividing a farm business equally is a mathematical problem, but dividing it equitably requires a great deal of self-assessment of abilities, interests, commitment, and other factors. I'm thinking about the people that are listening and fast forwarding to when they're talking with young producers and trying to motivate them or the next generation to take action on this. At Northwest Farm Credit, we know that these are very tough decisions, and we've seen this handled in a lot of different ways. I've had customers that, like an example earlier, were really grooming one of the kids for a long time to take over the operation, and others that just waited until the very last minute and things just didn't come together. But those families have to make the decision, or the government will. There's frequently not enough farm income, as you know, to support multiple families on the farm. And the only way to make the operation work is if things aren't completely equal. A lot of times mom and dad also don't agree either. And that's a really big challenge, because if they don't agree on it, how is everybody else going to? But, you know, ultimately we feel like they have to make that tough call together and be in alignment. They have to articulate what they want their legacy to be, you know, lock together on that and then go forward. That could be wealth, opportunity for the next generation, or something different. Some things to consider in balancing fair and equal is balancing the strategic and non-strategic assets, you know, the core assets that have to remain to keep that farm operation going. But separate some of the assets that have to be given up if they're non-essential. You know, for instance, like we recently saw, you know, a customer had a field that they purchased not long ago. It wasn't contiguous property with the larger part of the farm. We've seen, you know, some non-essential equipment, recreational items, or, you know, other properties that have to be given up. Somebody mentioned the family heirlooms before. Things of sentimental value have great value, even if you can't put a dollar on it. Off-farm kids don't want to lose their connection to the farm, even if they're not there every day. How do you help them, but then also keep the core assets of the farm intact so that it can be successful? You know, a common tactic that we'll see is that the off-farm kids are reserved a piece of property on the farm and they can build a home there later in the future. We see that as a pretty common request. Other things like continued participation in harvest helps maintain a connection. It's unique to each family. It's as different as every one of us. You know, a lot of small and medium-sized farms and ranches don't have that extra, and that's just a hard truth. But fair versus equal can be very far from equal. We just find that talking to mom and dad and saying, okay, you guys got to decide what you want to do, and then tell everybody so they know, even if it's hard to get done, is the first step. John, how do you take on the problem of equal versus equitable division of a farm business?
Well, I think one of the things that people have to realize is that it's most unfair to treat unequals equally. And by that, I mean, oftentimes there has been one heir who's worked on the farm for many years and may not have ever received much compensation for that. So what's it worth if you worked on the farm all those years? And I put together a spreadsheet years ago to try and help people put a number to that so that they maybe have a discussion about the number, but got away from that ad hominem attack. And that I think an example that I often use was about if one child came back to the farm and three didn't, and the one that came back, the parents said, we're going to pay you $1,000 a week to come back and work on the farm. We just want you to know, though, we're going to treat you and your siblings equally. And at the end of the first week, they gave the on-farm heir $250 and gave $250 to each one of the other kids. And I used to ask the question, does that sound fair? And of course, everybody says, no, it's not fair. And you ask the question, why? Well, they didn't work for it. So we need to tie compensation to contribution. And when I sat with a farm family, I have three questions that I ask the non-business heirs. Do you want to participate in management? Usually they don't. Occasionally one of them will. And then I ask the question, when was the last time you managed a modern farm business? And if they say they never have, well, what management skill do you have to offer to this business? You're asking for a job, but you don't have any skills to do the job. So why should the business hire you? The second question that I ask them is, do you want to participate in money? And of course, everybody wants to participate in money. And if they say yes, I ask the question, well then, businesses some years lose money, farms lose money some years due to crop failures or market failures. And are you willing to dip into your 401k to make the business financially stable? And if you're not, then you can't participate in the money because you shifted the risk of loss entirely to the operator. And if compensation and contribution are going to be tied together, as it be, that's even then. And in terms of ownership of land, I ask them, how long do you, if you want to own the land, how long do you want to own it? Because, you know, if there's 4 kids and you got 1,000 acres, okay, each one gets 250 acres. Well, what if each one of those kids has 3 or 4 children? A couple of generations, you're down to where you fractionated the ownership so badly that it's not a viable business. And in most states, there are these partition actions where you can just, you know, basically divide everything up. And so I'm a great believer in buy-sell agreements as part of the business plan. And I'm a great believer in having the in-business heir be the one that determines when to buy. And if they have been on the farm for many years and not been compensated for it, then there should be a large family discount. I'll finish up with one little last story. One of our farm management specialists years ago here at Iowa State University told about the fellow came into his office and said, Phil, my father just died and I'm going to take over running the farm. I'm going to need some help. And Phil said, sure, what can I do for you? He said, would you show me how to write a check? Continue with business without those skills. I'm sure the family still owns the land, but there's very few, there's not as many complex decisions about being a landowner as there is operating a farm business. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, I have a friend that says he wished he'd have married a woman whose last name was Land and Cattle Company. Owning farmland is not a bad thing, but it's not a farm business unless there's a family farm. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, what are some practical ways that you've seen to resolve perceived inequities as farm assets are divided up, and who should bear the present cost of a future benefit?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And John hit on some of those as well. You know, buy-sell agreements are a big part of what we do. So making sure that those folks that are active with the farm and have that sweat equity get rightly rewarded for that. One of the things that we see often as a fit, especially if those disinterested parties don't even live near the farm, they moved all the way across the country. You know, they may view the farm as a place to come for Christmas or the holidays, but that's about it. So having that piece of paper that says you own it may not be the best fit for their lives as well. So one of the things that we see is coming up with a life insurance product that fits the needs of that. So leveraging your dollars today, buying a life insurance product to provide a cash, you know, a death benefit that's tax-free to that individual that's not active with the farm. So what's fair isn't always equal, and what's equal isn't always fair. So that number doesn't necessarily have to be, like you said, Jessica, doesn't necessarily have to be that mathematical, you know, it's worth $3 million, so $1 million, $1 million, $1 million. You know, you've got sweat equity, you've got a tax-free death benefit as well. That goes a long ways, as opposed to me continuing to work that operation every single day of my life. Not the same from a dollar perspective. So we see life insurance used quite a bit. And then the other one that we see quite a bit is John was spot on. Maybe the non-active children are given a portion of land, or maybe it's the land is now held in some sort of business entity that they have shares of. So they're entitled to some participation with the farm, but in reality, they just have that piece of paper that they shove on the shelf that says, hey, I still own this. So make sure I'm part of the discussions going forward. So that's typically what we'll see.
Thanks, Ryan. I'd like to pose a question from the audience here, and either one or both please respond. It's a two-part question. For family farms with multiple owners or trust arrangements, how do you recommend planning for an eventual transition from a C Corp to an S Corp? And as a follow-up, what are the tax consequences?
Yeah, so John, I can hit on this if you want to, and then fill in if that works with you.
Go ahead.
Great.
Yes,
Yeah,
please. Go ahead.
this is kind of my nerdiness coming out. So I'm more of a tax planning attorney, business attorney, kind of at heart. So I would say there's a couple of big things to look out for, especially with multiple entities and things of that nature. The biggest one that always gets me is if you participate in any farm services agency programs, so ARC or PLC, any of those farm subsidy programs, your entity selection has to be very on point to make sure that you don't miss any of those payments you're otherwise entitled for. So before anything, make sure that you have a discussion with your FSA officer to make sure those are set up right. As far as switching from a C to an S, there's a few things just to be cautious of or be aware of. There's no direct impact from making that shift from a C to an S. And actually, and John, you can probably speak to this a little better, but I would say right now, most of the farms that I see from an operational perspective set themselves up as an S Corp. So S Corp, at least under today's tax law, and who knows, January that could change, but today's structure, that seems to be the one that's favored. And there's a lot of perks to it. There's different code sections out there. I'd encourage you to have a discussion with your accountant on. So 199A is a big one, especially for those S Corp owners. That'll give you a nice deduction potentially, especially if you sell to co-ops. The one that you do have to watch out for switching from a C to an S, especially if you have those physical assets, say farm equipment, there's a big tax, and it's actually called big. So it's built-in gains tax. And that one effectively says that if I have these physical assets and I move to an S Corp and I sell them within the first 5 years, well, they're going to treat that as if I sold it under a C Corp. So you don't get that favorability of the S Corp on those sales, but you have to at least make it past that 5-year mark to have them treated like you're an S Corp instead of a C Corp. The other one that you just want to watch out for would be carryover losses. Those could be impacted as well, but those are some of the big ones that I tend to see. John, any other comments you want to offer?
The only other comment would be how many enterprises are you moving into that? And it may be that you want an operating entity that's an S Corp, but if you have, if you're hauling grain for the neighbors, maybe you don't want that enterprise included in that S Corp. From a risk management strategy, you may want to spin that out and form a LLC or to capture some of that risk. There may be some tax consequences that would be favorable to doing that also. And one of the other things, you form business entities not only to capture risk, but to manage better, because you have to look at those entities and really try to, are they making money for you? Are they losing money? If you have an enterprise that's continually losing money, stop doing it. And how do you know that if it's all just kind of in one pot? So that would be my only other comment.
Thank you for that. So we're going to wrap up at 11:30, and I don't see additional questions right now. But I would like to ask you both. Maybe we'll start with you, Ryan. What's your best advice to our audience on where to start? What do you tell people when they ask where should you begin the process of farm succession planning?
Yep, I would say best place to start is building a team. So it's not just on your shoulders, and that pressure shouldn't be just on you. So build a team that's really going to support you. So work with a financial professional, your loan officer, help them work to shape this team to really get everybody on the same page. that's where I would say definitely to start, because those folks are going to be out there. And just as an example, we've helped with certain legislative action to really empower this young and beginning generation to have some better tax efficiencies when it comes to succession planning. So having that team around you to know, or at least are aware of those things you could be using, I think is critical. And that may not come from, one person. They may not be telling you that information. So having that team feeding you this information so you can make better decisions is key.
Great, thank you. How about you, John?
I always like a quote from Alice in Wonderland, where the white rabbit asked the King of Hearts how to play croquet, and the King of Hearts replied, "Well, start at the very beginning and go straight through to the end." In other words, don't start with your estate plan, because you can do things in an estate plan that will limit your ability to do something else. If you put the property into an irrevocable trust and then you decide that you want to move it into a business entity, you may not be able to do that. So start at the beginning. And the beginning for me, when I work with farm families, is always tell me what you want to do. What do you want your future to look like? How important is that? Are you willing to do the things to create that future? And if the answer to those questions is yes, then let's see if that future is feasible on the asset base, the management base, and the financial base you've got. So you have to do those inventories and analysis and begin working and that process through. The other thing that I would mention, that there is a system of management called the critical path method of management, and I would commend that to everyone. It allows you to break down complex management tasks into smaller chunks, and that it was developed by a fellow named Hyman Rickover. He was an admiral who built the first nuclear submarine, and no one knew whether you could even do it. And he figured out this management system that worked very well. Farmers do this anyhow. The example I use is if you're going to plant a crop, what's the first thing you do? Well, you don't buy the seed. You better start out with, or if you're going to borrow money, what's the banker want to see? Good books and records, right? So if they're all do you do them yourself, or do you have some, consultant come in? And if that's what's the consultant want? Well, he wants to see all your receipts and inventories and all that. Well, if they're all in the shoebox, maybe the thing that you have to do to plant the crop next year is get the shoebox out and organize all that so that you can have a financial analysis done, so you can see the lender to borrow the money, to buy the seed, to get the machinery ready to go to the field. You can apply that same thought process to planning. So I would encourage people to take a look at that. There is another resource that's available through the Center for Farm Financial Management at the University of Minnesota that allows you to do transition planning online. It's a good place to have a repository of that material available. You can also ask for people to review that. I know I've been asked to review plans. You can also allow the same people to review it to change your plan, to not only make comments, but to go in and change it. So there's some good things there. The last thing I will say is that, 35, 40 years ago, when I started working on this issue, as I explained, coming out of the farm debt crisis and looking at that as a problem, there wasn't a lot of programs out there that looked at successful transitions and beginning farmer issues and that. I think Iowa was one of the first states in the nation to create a beginning farmer center. And now there are many programs that are emphasizing this. And I think it's just absolutely wonderful that this is going on. And, the fact that as an old guy, I got to do what I wanted to do in my life with the help of a lot of people that want to be farmers, then let's help them do what they want to do. And if we do it right, we'll build another generation beyond that, because they'll know how to transition the business.
That's great. Thank you, John. And thank you, Ryan. You know, I think for me in closing, we've just scratched the surface here and pointed people to a lot of good resources. And I think that, you know, I just think about our firm service agency and the great people with extension that are all out working with our young and beginning producers, and want to extend an invitation to anybody who wants to continue their learning on this topic, to also consider attending some of our free virtual workshops. I mean, that's the beauty of having this virtual space, even though the beginning was pretty darn rough, and I apologize for that. So those are out under our Business Management Center, and you can access those anytime, but we do have some events that are actually scheduled. So thank you, John and Ryan, for an interesting and enlightening discussion and all of your expertise. This session has been recorded and will be available on the Farm Foundation website for viewing at a later time by you or friends that you recommend. Ryan, John, and I will be in the open networking session if you would like to follow up with us or other conference attendees. Gary, I'll turn it over to you for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Jesika. I'm glad you were able to join us. I'm sure that you have, probably you don't have as little hair as John, Ryan, or myself from pulling it out, but you might be close. Before we encourage everyone to go to the networking session, I didn't reveal the poll results. Oh, and there's another question there. Hey, okay, last 30-second answer here for all of you. How long does farm succession planning tend to take?
Yeah, I can touch on that. I would say it's probably a few months process, but it's not a one and done. So don't ever say you've done your will and that's it, I'm good. It's something you need to review with every year, or if there's any big changes, I'd say make sure you note those. So it's an ongoing thing. So not necessarily just a one and done. It'll take a little bit of time to do the initial part and then review, always review.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Ryan. And it's not just a 4-hour meeting. It's going to take, depending upon the issues involved, it's going to take some time. And actually, it's a process. It's like a process of management. Something that has to be reviewed is, are the job descriptions accurate? Have you added enterprise? Have you shed enterprises? Are you profitable? And as I talk with farmers, I'll say, do you have a will? Yeah, we had one made up back in 1993. Wow, asset values have changed a little bit since then. So maybe we'll be looking at this a little bit.
That's great. I was just going to add that, looking at the customers that I've been involved with that have gone through this, it varied greatly from parents that, we had the grandkids at the closing table and mom and dad were in tears and it was happy tears and it was, done in less than 6 months. But then we've had them go on over years and years and lots of arguments and, coming back together, and it takes all kinds, which is where we try to focus in on the conversations of quality in the beginning so that we can get through the process that John and Ryan have talked about technically in an efficient manner.
Great. Well, thank you all for taking a stab at that last question from the audience. I would like to look at our poll results just quickly. And the question, if you remember, was how do you imagine beginning farmers think about farm business succession planning? And 35% of you said they were interested, but would put it off as long as possible. 33% of you said they were willing to do it, but waiting for someone else to start. So there's almost 70% right there. 16 of you were pretty blunt about this. When asked, how do you imagine beginning farmers think about farm business succession planning, you said, not at all. That was my answer, I have to say. Another 9% said they don't want to talk about it and be seen as greedy. And a whopping 7% were seen as being enthusiastically engaged. Maybe we got a little work to do with helping beginning farmers think about farm succession planning and becoming engaged. I know over the course of this conference, the 2 days that we've just done now and a month earlier, when the topic came up about farm succession planning and beginning farmers, the beginning farmers themselves were at some point in their panels usually said, yeah, I don't have time for that. I haven't done that yet. That's down the road. I just don't want to think about it yet. I'm too busy building my business. And, we all have to allocate our time with what we want to do. But as we think about our responsibilities as trainers, as those who coach beginning farmers, help them with business planning, I think we really have to take a longer view and communicate that to beginning farmers that there's no time when they should not be thinking of what could happen. Think about John's story, that it only takes a moment for your life to change. The number of people who don't have life insurance, who don't have the other insurances that they really should have as they start farming is startling. And so we've still got a lot of work to do. There's plenty to do for those of us engaged in the business, in the noble pursuit of helping beginning farmers get into business. Well, I want to thank our panel that we just finished with: Jesika from Northwest Farm Credit, Ryan from Nationwide, and John from Iowa State. Thank you all for your insights on this. I know we had a lot of expertise here on this panel, and I think we got a lot of it out of you, so thank you. Looking back over this conference, trying to provide resources and tools for working with beginning farmers and ranchers. That was the goal that the Farm Foundation and Farm Credit sought to do. And we divided it into pieces of about financial skills training materials and building the communities that you need to have to make sure that you can have the right partners. What are some new tools that you may not have heard of that we'd like you to hear about? What are some beginning farmer entrance strategy stories that were really all about success and learning? And then finally, supporting generational transfers. I think we covered a lot of ground. I'd ask you to consider looking at those topics and seeing if you include those topics in your beginning farmer training program. If you don't, it doesn't mean you have to go learn how to be an expert on that. Think about the partnerships that were talked about in session 2, that really there are a lot of people willing and able to help you with the stuff that you don't know how to do if you're a beginning farmer trainer. And I encourage you to look at the available resources in terms of partnerships, and you could probably find partners in very, very odd places, like came out in our partnership conversation in session 2. Partnering with a library. Wow, I never heard of that before, I gotta tell you. So there's a lot of possibilities out there. If you think you saw one of these sessions that was particularly helpful to you and might be to others, all of these sessions will be available online for you to view at a later time. And with that, I would say thank you for attending. We appreciate your being here, and please join us in the networking sessions. Underneath the video that you've been watching, underneath the Q&A, there's a button that says Networking Lounge. Click on that. Go through a fairly easy login on that, and we'll look forward to sitting down at a virtual table with you in the networking sessions. Thanks so very much for coming.